It's 22 minutes to 8.
And its morning report, the National Party has been critical of the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and her handling of the Manus Island affair and the relationship with Australia. Let's talk now to the former Foreign Minister Gerry Brownlee, who's standing in for Bill English, who was unavailable for an interview this morning. Thanks for coming into the studio this morning.
Oh, thank you.
What do you make of the way Jacinda Ardern is handling this issue?
Well, I think it tends to deny the problem that Australia's got. So it's not just the 400 people who are protesting on Manus Island, the males who are protesting on Manus Island, protesting because they don't want to leave that facility, which Australia's trying to close down. And many of those you'll find are not eligible to be considered refugees or asylum seekers. So they've got other motives for creating the attention they have.
How do you know that?
Well, okay, I'm not going to go into that. But if you
okay.
ask the question of the Prime Minister, are we going to take any of those 400 males who are currently protesting? What the Prime Minister has said is that we'll take 150, and that's always been our position too.
And that's from Nauru as well as
UNHCR approved refugees, among the about 2,000 that Australia are dealing with. You know, they spent $1.3 billion in the 14-15 year, and the 15-16 year, and the 16-17 year. Now, another $980 million. It's a very expensive problem for them. And also remember that since those facilities opened, there's been no boat people coming or attempting to come to Australia since 2013. And when those boats were coming, a lot of people were dying through drownings, the sinking of the boat, etc. So it hasn't been an unsuccessful approach that Australia's taken as far as humanitarian things.
Do you support Australia's approach?
Look, I think you have to, because this is a country that takes 5 times the number of refugees that we do per capita, and is dealing with a serious problem. They've got big sea borders. And, you know, it's kind of odd that we've got two parties in a minority coalition, both campaigned on tightening up immigration to New Zealand, but now getting very excited about taking any number of these refugees.
But to be fair, they're vastly different issues, aren't they? Immigration versus refugees.
Well, they're all PR in the end, permanent residents in the end. And the interesting thing is that the changes we made to the PR status requirements in the early part of this year will see those numbers fall. There'll be nothing this government does that will cause the 10,000 or so drop that you can see. But Mr Peters will be out there claiming that.
Okay, let's go back to Manus though. We had the UN officials just last week reported in the New York Times saying they'd never seen a wealthy democracy go to such extremes to punish asylum seekers and push them away.
Yeah, quite an outrageous statement in my opinion.
Do you think so?
I do think so. Remember that Australia have got a deal with the US to take 1,250, and they want that deal to stick because they've got this large number of people there. I don't doubt in the end there'll be that 150 will be taken up at some point.
Well, it's 1,200. Hang on. The 150 that we've offered to take.
That'll be over and above the 1,250 that the United States
take. And you think that Australia will ultimately end up saying to New Zealand, yes, you take 150?
I think that's a possibility, but you've got to let them go through the process. They're dealing with a couple of thousand people. It's not a simple thing, and it's not an easy thing.
So returning
for us to say, for us to say, look, we'll take 150 UNHCR, and I see yesterday the Prime Minister said that our officials are talking to Australians. That'll be interesting, trying to qualify people who might come to New Zealand.
What do you mean by that? That'll be interesting.
Well, are they actually talking about that at this stage, or is it just a broader discussion? Sounded yesterday like it was something that was, organising an imminent decision. I don't think that's the case. So, well, the real point is that we're selecting refugees to come to New Zealand on the basis of their being a good fit for our country, but it still leaves Australia with a massive problem. And I think criticising them for dealing with people who have gone through 6 countries in some cases, trying to get to Australia to seek asylum or refugee status is pretty harsh.
But what is it that Jacinda Ardern has done that is different from what John Key or Bill English did? I mean, the offer's been on the table for 4 years. What is it that you are critical about the way that she has handled things?
I think the amping it up and saying that it's an unacceptable situation and Australia needs to recognise its international responsibilities, etc. I think that's a step just a bit too far. It just doesn't recognise the problem that you've got. And I'll say again, I think the question for the Prime Minister is, will we be taking any of the 400 males who are currently protesting on Manus Island?
Winston Peters said in one of his first press conferences after becoming Foreign Minister that the relationship that you'd left between New Zealand and Australia was suboptimal, didn't he? He said it wasn't good enough and needed to be improved. Where do you think it's at now?
Oh, look, I think that's just sort of thing that Winston Peters often says. I don't think there's anything or was anything wrong with the Australia-New Zealand relationship. Australia, remember, were dealing and are dealing with a very, very big budget deficit that is out for many years in front of them. And so they were putting up tertiary fees for Australians and also they're massively hiking their foreign fee payers. New Zealanders were sort of in between that in a different category. And we were working through with them, and at this stage they haven't made any particular changes to that. But I don't think the relationship was not in bad shape, far from it. And you saw the warmth between the previous two Prime Ministers and Mr Turnbull and Mr Abbott before that, and Ms Gillard before that.
Do you think it's getting worse now? Are you making that claim? Or?
I'm not making that claim. What I'm saying is that this is a tension point that's a little bit unnecessary.
On Winston Peters, he signed his papers suing senior National Party former ministers, indeed the Chief of Staff and the head of the MSD, the day before the election. Then he sat down and negotiated with you guys. A couple of your people have said he didn't negotiate in good faith. What's your view?
Look, I was part of that negotiating team, and there's a confidentiality agreement around those discussions, and I want to respect that.
Yeah, that's the detail. But what about the spirit?
Well, as I say, the discussions were broad across the whole of the policy range.
Yeah, but frankly, did he negotiate in good faith? Well, he was suing you.
Well, I'm not going to make a comment about that. He's not suing me. He's suing a number of people. I think it's odd that he's suing the head of a government department. And it will, I think, have odd repercussions, because if you take away the no surprises expectation of ministers, which a case like this will do, then that puts any government in a difficult position.
Thanks for your time this morning. Do appreciate it. That's Gerry Brownlee, National MP, and of course the former Foreign Minister. It's 14 minutes now to 8.
Coalition negotiations in Germany have broken down, but